So there's a lot of talk in the media at the moment about the possibility of developing a coronavirus vaccine. And I understand that we're really looking for a bit of hope and a bit of optimism in a pretty miserable situation. But it is a really difficult, long-term process to develop a vaccine that is effective and protects every section of our community. But the possibility of having a government that is effective and protects every section of our community is such a long way off, distant and unbelievable pipe dream, that if we're looking for hope and optimism, I think we will have to focus on the vaccine business. And there is some good news, there really is. The early results of the Oxford trial suggest that it does encourage the build-up of antibodies. We don't quite know what they're going to do, and suggests that it is safe for people to take it, at least for healthy people to take it. So we're looking at, if things continue to go well, and depending on what testing is allowed and whether challenge trials are allowed and all this kind of thing, we're looking at the possibility of within sort of 6 months to 2 years, there being a vaccine available. Now the thing is that there will always be a slice of our population who cannot take a vaccine and for whom a vaccine isn't effective because they just don't have a functioning immune system. So in order for those people to be protected, what we need is for everybody else in our society, everybody who is able to take the vaccine, to take it. And that's where the biggest problem comes in. Because 1 in 6 people in Britain have said that if a coronavirus vaccine is developed, they won't take it. And 1 in 6 is a large enough slice of the population that if they're wandering around passing it to each other for an illness as contagious as coronavirus, we will never get rid of it. And the most vulnerable in our society will literally never be able to leave their hermetically sealed bubbles within their homes and be a part of society and get back to work and do all those things that they may want to do. So it's super important that we are vigilant and get out there and deal with the dissemination of the nonsense that the anti-vaxxers are putting out left, right and centre. We know that anti-vax campaigners have already led to outbreaks of things like measles and other medical conditions that just shouldn't be affecting people anymore. And as a result, young people have died, and we shouldn't be living in a society like this. So we have to keep saying this. And I bet most of my listeners are already on board with this, but I'm just urging you to say it to other people. The legislation around vaccines is quite draconian. There is no way that they would ever allow a vaccine to go out into the public if it wasn't hundreds and hundreds of times safer to take it than to not take it. Nobody is saying that there's never been a problem caused by a vaccine. You can get medical complications that relate to vaccines, but the risk of not taking it is always higher. Otherwise, they wouldn't allow it. And I am so sure of this and so confident of this that I'm actually a volunteer in the Oxford vaccine trial, and I thought that some of you might be interested in how that works and what's going on. If not, well, there you go. There's my message for the week. Go and tell everybody that vaccines are great. And if you are interested, here's what's happening. So I heard that the Oxford University AstraZeneca trial were looking for volunteers, and I want there to be a vaccine, and I want this horror to be over, and I want to have my job back and be able to see the people I care about, and I want people to not be at risk. So I put my name forward and I went in, and they did innumerable tests on me, and they measured my blood pressure and my heart rate, and they were very impressed. And then they checked about a dozen times whether I was pregnant or not, because you can't be trying out new medicines on pregnant people. And they made me sign a piece of paper saying that I would not get pregnant for the next year, which I duly, and that I would use reliable and effective forms of contraception. And then they gave me an injection. And there's a 50% chance that what they gave me was a meningitis vaccination, which was already on the market, which already exists, and a 50% chance that they gave me the new possible COVID vaccine. And they're actually trialling it in 2 different doses, and I've had the larger dose. So it's possible that if it really does work, I might be immune already, but they don't tell you which you've had because they don't want your behaviour to change as a result of believing that you're immune or whatever. And the reason they don't just give you an empty non-vaccine is as the alternative is that they expect the COVID vaccine to give you some minor side effects when you first get it. And so you'd know if you'd had just nothing, and you'd know if you had any side effects at all that you'd had the potential COVID vaccine. So anyway, a couple of days later, I definitely had a sore arm and a stiff neck. So I definitely had something. Something has changed. Something was happening in my body. And since then, I get weekly COVID tests that I have at home. And so you might have heard about these. They're quite gross. You have like a very long cotton bud. And first of all, you put it in your throat, like just right at the point where it would make you gag. But it's not so bad because you're doing it yourself. So you can sort of look in the mirror and get it in the right place. And then if you think you're going to gag, you kind of stop and go back to it and stop and go back to it. And then it gets worse. Then you put the same thing up your nose. Who decided to save on swabs? I'm not sure about. Anyway, you put the same thing up your nose, and they say that you need to put it up your nose until you feel resistance. Do not try this at home. And you think that's all right, I just put it up my nose and then there'll be some resistance and I'll twizzle it round. You'd be amazed how far up your nose the thing will go before you experience resistance. It's like sweeping a chimney. And I get a lot of internet trolls telling me I've got a big nose. So I suppose I was warned about this, but yeah, it goes in and it goes in and it goes in and it feels weird and sort of tickly and uncomfortable. We're not exactly painful, but there's still no resistance, and there's no resistance, and eventually there is resistance, and I don't know whether it had hit my eye or my brain, but evidently one of those needed sampling. And you twizzle it around a bit and you take it out, and then you sneeze very heavily. And I send it off on a Thursday morning and I get the results back on a Friday, which means that Friday is a very good time to hang out with me because I actually know at that point that I'm COVID negative each week. And then, obviously the chance that I've got it goes up each day with anybody that I interact with. But then I find out that I'm negative again on a Friday morning. And I also go in once a month and have a blood test, which is to see if I've built up antibodies, but they don't tell me the result of that blood test because it might affect my behaviour. I might go around, licking people or whatever, which frankly I sometimes do anyway. But so I'm not allowed to know the result of that. And I'm going to be on this for a year, although the amount of tests becomes less and less frequent. And I've also signed a piece of paper saying that if I do get COVID, they are entitled to a sample of my poop. So that's nice. I will refrain from bringing in a spare one just in case for every test. But yeah, it's inconvenient and it's kind of unpleasant, although it has its upsides. It's really convenient to be tested every week because then on a Friday when I've had my result back, I feel like if I do want to go and visit somebody who's vulnerable or whatever, at least I've had a very recent test and I feel much more confident doing that. And yeah, another thing that people have asked me, so I guess I'll answer it, is whether I'm worried about getting the virus from the vaccine because, they understand that vaccines are sort of like you're getting a small dose of the virus to encourage you to build up antibodies. And the answer to that is no. That's not how vaccines work anymore. That is how vaccines worked in the early days. But these days, they don't actually give you the virus. They give you like a completely harmless virus, but that has been like genetically engineered to have the same kind of outside shape as the coronavirus, which means that your antibodies in your blood will learn how to latch on to that kind of shape of virus, which means that if you do then get the coronavirus, your antibodies are already geared up to latch onto it. That's the theory. But it means that I'm not at any stage being given anything that I could potentially get coronavirus symptoms from, or potentially have coronavirus pass it to anybody or get infected or anything like that. And yeah, there's an upside to it and a downside to it, but the reason to be a part of it is firstly because I genuinely do believe that vaccines are safe and that vaccine trials are safe things to be involved with. And I also believe that it's incredibly important that we get there. And I really, really hope that it leads to a solution. And if you're out there trying to figure out how we can get rid of all the 5G or whatever it is that you thought causes coronavirus, then, thanks for joining in, but this is the thing that might work. And I really, really hope it does, for my sake and all of yours. And see you next week.